Okay, the recording has started, and this is the January 21st, 2020 Crossplane community meeting. The first thing that we'll start with today is that the 0.7.0 release went out on Friday. So we finished that up on Friday afternoon before the holiday weekend here. And thank you very much, Hashdan, for all the help in running that release. We just paired up on that on the dev channel and the community Crossplane Slack, and split up the work items there and got the release out without any hiccups or issues that I recall after the long weekend, at least. Right, Dan? It was a pretty smooth process, wasn't it? Sweet, thumbs up from Dan. All right, so yeah, so that went out on Friday. One of the interesting things to note there, the full release notes are available on GitHub, so you can see all the features and everything that was included in there. But one thing of interest was that template stacks, an experience for that is now available. It's experimental still. It's an early effort on it, but you can now try out template stacks with the 0.7 release. One question that I thought of as I was adding things to the agenda doc here today is that we probably need to do a release or also push, at least build and publish the images for the minimal stacks that we have as well. We have an agenda item later on about how we want to do that, but I think that's something that we probably want to do so that they are available and semantically versioned as well. So let me know if anybody has big objections to that, but we could talk in more detail later on in the agenda. And then we also want to do a blog post. That was something that was not part of the Friday release there. Dan, do you want to, I think Dan or Mocha, you think you all have a latest update on that?
Yeah, I got started on it this morning, and I've been collaborating with Phil, who I don't think is on this call, but we're planning on having that out by end of day today.
Awesome, cool. So we will get that published and available for today. That sounds great then. All right, cool. Yep. So 0.7. I feel like every month that this process is fairly consistent. It's not a high cost to it as well. So we have a regular cadence of features and fixes going out with a scheduled, expected mid-month type of release. So that's been really effective, I think. And so the next release around 0.8 would be expected to be the mid-February timeframe. And the week of February 17th is where we can target there. We can talk more about if a code freeze or specific dates around that, but the week of Mondays, the February 17th looks pretty good from a regular cadence perspective. One thing we might want to consider also is that we have been doing releases on Fridays, but I think it's not always the best idea. Obviously, there's some well-known wisdom around not pushing to production on a Friday afternoon. And Crossplane's not really running a specific live service, so it's a bit of a different scenario. But having a release running on Friday evening while some people are trying to get to other engagements and such is not always ideal either. So we consider doing it like on a Wednesday or earlier in the week than doing it on a Friday. I think the roadmap, now that we're going into 0.8 here, needs updating. So if we, I think that we had it updated through 0.7, and then we have, we've got a lot of nice releases here. Wow. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of items here that are in the roadmap, but are not scheduled or assigned to a particular release. So we need to follow up and update the roadmap for specific items that we're targeting and planning in the 0.8 release. So let's take an action item for that. And Phil's been doing such a good job with that recently, so. All right. Is there any topics or anything that people want to bring up for the milestones and releases and features and stuff like that?
I had one that was down there. It's in PRs, which I guess it's actually an issue. But I opened it this morning. Steven brought it up that the RC tag doesn't get picked up on master for either Crossplane or the stacks until we merge another commit, and that's part because the promotion happens on master as part of the build pipeline. So just adding a new tag doesn't actually result in promotion of that. So obviously it's not like a huge problem because we frequently have a new commit coming in pretty soon after whenever the RC tag is applied. But I believe we could just run the promotion pipeline directly on the master branch, which would allow us to promote the RC tag to master. So you'll see 0.6.0 RC is still showing up with the chart version. Not like a huge issue in terms of functionality, but it would be nice to fix that up.
Right. So just running the master pipeline, normal build pipeline would take care of that immediately, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. We should just probably do that.
So that could be part of the release process if we want to after we tag in master to go ahead and just run the build pipeline and have it out there.
Yeah, and that should probably all the stuff that we did on Friday, we should probably update the release process with it because we followed a little bit amended of a process, I think. So
yeah, that's a good point. I have a to do. I captured an item about that of updating the release process to include all of that that new or the different approach to so that versions get synced better between the docs and the stack repos and all that sort of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just looking at my notes now. I did capture that. Let me just leave a note here real quick. Okay, there we go. And then I'll add that to my notes too to have a process update. Okay, cool. Thanks, Dan, for bringing that up. All right, so we can move down to the community topics section here. So we have a set of stacks that, easy stack, minimal stack that make it very simple to set up a particular environment with the right networking and cloud artifacts there to be able to easily configure applications within that configured infrastructure. And they have a home in the Crossplane org, that those stacks and those repos there, but they do not have build pipelines, and they're not part of the release process. So it seems like similarly to the infrastructure stacks that we have, the cloud provider infrastructure stacks such as GCP and Azure and AWS, that it would make sense to have these stacks here be part of the version release process with the automatic build pipeline and all that sort of stuff. So they just kind of go with the flow of the other releases. So that seems like it makes sense to me to include those in there. I don't know if there are any objections to that, or if we have a tracking issue for that already. Is there an issue for that already that we are aware of? I'm not sure if there is.
I don't think so.
Let's see. Okay, so yeah, we should open issue on that and follow up on that as well. And I guess, yeah, we could probably do like build and push them before having like a full automated process in place as well, so that they're available immediately. So we should probably follow up on that in a more short term than the whole process update sort of thing. This action item section is getting a little bit longer than it normally does. Right, is Suskin on the call? It doesn't look like it. But yeah, this is an item that I wanted to bring up, and I know Daniel, it's related to the work he was doing, and he definitely has some opinions on it. So he opened an issue for it as well. So perhaps the discussion can take place there instead. But just to bring up the issue is that we have what we consider a definition of done in the Crossplane organization, where features need to have a certain level of design document or architecture thinking, need to have a certain amount of test coverage, need to have user guides for how to use them and such. And so we've defined that process, but we don't really have a good process in place for features or work that we consider more experimental, that we're not quite sure. It's like an early preview type of thing where we're not quite sure what the feature is going to look like long term, or what the life cycle of it is going to be, and we want to get it out to be able to get some people using it in the community, getting some feedback from folks, and it's quite possible that features that are considered more experimental, we want to have maybe a different process around them. Like maybe test coverage doesn't make as much sense if we're not even sure if the feature is going to live in the same state that it does. You might want to hide them behind feature flags so that they're not enabled by default for people as well. There needs to be more opt-in. So we need to kind of think through that and figure out kind of a framework for that, or some process around what we want to do with more experimental features, or if that's something that we really want to even accept in the first place. So there's some discussion around that needs to be done. I don't know what the issue number is, but if somebody happens to find that, because I think it was opened just a few days ago, you can link it for me here in the agenda document. That would be great. Okay, and if anybody wants to add comments on that right now, that's perfectly fine.
There was similar, not quite the same, it was an experimental feature, but Crossplane runtime changed a few things about the reconciler, changed the paths in such a way that the developer guide that we have doesn't match reality right now. I ran into that over the weekend, and I just, I don't know exactly if this falls under the same category, but that's something else to try to avoid. It's not just the user guides, but it's also the developer guides that need to be maintained as we make these changes.
Yeah, I have a to-do to update the developer guide, per you bringing that up to me, Marcus. Another thing that might be worth keeping in mind that is also in line with this kind of point we're talking about is for this change in Crossplane runtime, we opted to just go ahead and kind of like switch over to the new package structure, since we were doing a new release that indicated breaking changes and that sort of thing. In the future, it might be worth, especially at a more mature phase of the project and of the library, considering keeping the old structure as a deprecated way to do it, but still allowing users to upgrade and continue usage, especially since there were no feature changes as part of the reorganization. So that might be something to just consider when we're writing up like a policy for feature flagging and deprecations and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and then I agree with you that they're not quite the same issue. Like experimental features, like new things that are coming out that we're not quite sure the future of them is. The contract around those is something a little bit different than existing things we have, like Crossplane runtime features, where we want to make sure that the updates and changes there are done in a reasonable way, but also that the documentation doesn't go out of date. So thanks for bringing that up, Marcus. And sounds like we'll follow up on that.
This also relates to I've been trying to plot out a course of issues in Epics around our versioning and upgrading, and stones like this I'm trying to uncover and ultimately land issues representing them. So it's on my mind.
Yeah, definitely. I bet it is. Okay, and this next item here, Dan, is this something that you added? Do you want to go ahead and talk about that one?
Yeah, and we probably won't reach any sort of conclusion here, but it's just something to have on people's minds. So we've talked a little bit in some past community meetings about implementing integration tests. So we've done that. We're now actually running them with Stack GCP on a periodic schedule, and I've been tracking those since those merged into master, and they've been pretty successful. There hasn't been a lot of churn on the code while they've been running, but it is nice just to see every night that we're able to provision infrastructure and it comes up as expected and that sort of thing, and it's done in an automated fashion. So I'm really liking that we have this feature set. I'd like to continue to roll out to other stacks and potentially some kind of like full end-to-end stuff involving multiple stacks, just to continue to test our the quality of our software as it evolves. But definitely would love some input in terms of how frequently people think these tests needs to be run. Is a nightly basis good? Is that too frequent? What kind of things need to be included as tests? Do we want to start implementing a policy? Right now, we try to not merge anything to master on any of our repos that doesn't have unit tests implemented for everything there. And it's likely that we don't need integration tests for every PR that we create. But I think that, a good kind of like working definition of when it would be good to add integration tests is when there's any breaking changes to an API or implementation of a new API. I think those are good candidates for adding new integration tests or modifying existing ones. So I'll definitely be kind of like kicking that around in the community and seeing if people have thoughts about policies we can put in place for running those.
Did those start running over the weekend, Dan? Like, or we don't have a automatic schedule for them yet? Do we? No, I think we did.
We
right?
do, yeah, on Stack GCP. So they've run 4 times since being merged to master. Very consistent, all taking about 16 and a half minutes each time. They're spinning up new clusters, making sure things come available in them and that sort of thing.
And they were all green?
Yep, all green, no flakes or failures.
Nice, man. Very good.
One thing I was going to add, Dan, I've seen the pattern where when you're opening your pull request, it kind of like automatically detects if it's touching some patterns or some pieces of code. And then based on that triggers, puts the integration test one of the conditions to pass the pull request. So we could look into that, but I am not, on top of my head, I don't know any pattern in Golang. So probably some search would result in something.
Yeah, I know right now, like with like Prow or something like that, they have the bot that basically checks different directories if there's code changes in them that basically run tests based on that. At this point, with like the rapid evolvement of the project right now, I think it might be difficult to implement that sort of thing. I will say we are able to run integration tests on any specific branches manually. So since we do have a pretty narrow scope of like reviewers and approvers right now, then we can do that when we feel it's necessary. But I do think long-term, potentially implementing some sort of feature set into the bot that currently runs our tests might be useful in terms of automatically triggering integration tests. Right now, though, running it on a nightly basis pretty much catches everything because it's unusual that we have more than a few PRs on a given repo in a night.
Yeah, that's one approach too, is that, while we're kind of vetting that process, it's a new process, and seeing like what the stability of it is, like, the consistency of it. It's, having it like in a time-based periodic approach is pretty reasonable, because we can just kind of keep an eye on it, see how it's going, and then like, okay, it takes this amount of time or it has this amount of cost. Like, that'll give us information to better understand if we want to put it on a per commit basis, or if we want to change that process. But I'm glad it's been running all weekend and doing some work for us while we were off for the weekend. Okay, any other community topics here, or we can move on to the PRs? All right, the host-aware stack manager designed from Hassan. He had provided the design write-up and the and implementation for it as well. And I know Marcus had gotten to take a look at it, and I think maybe a couple others, but this is something that we haven't merged yet, and it had been, had been needing a little bit more attention recently. So that's something that's still, it's on my list to look at soon, but so wondering if there are any other eyes that had gotten on it and, had added approvals to it and such. So I wanted to bring that up for if anybody wanted to take a look at it further.
I thought I had rubber stamped it, but apparently I only left a few comments that he addressed one way or the other. So I still intend to give it a full review. I did run it, but it's not quite the same.
Got it. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, the implementation doesn't have any approvals still, right? You're right. Looks like we need to do some conflict resolution as well, some updates. Those look like they're in CRDs, so that should be an automated thing, so that shouldn't be too bad. Okay, sounds good. And then we talked about this one already, this issue. I'm just going to go ahead, since it's not a PR, I'm going to go ahead and, what did I just do? Move that up to where we talked about it. Okay. All right, so that's everything that was on the agenda. We have a number of action items here that we should probably put some names on as well. But before we do that, are there any other topics that people wanted to bring up in this forum before we move on to the final section? All right. All right, so yeah, Hashdan's you're gonna take care of updating the developer guide. Yep, that sounds good. Is Muafik back online, or he's back tomorrow, right?
He's back Wednesday, yeah. So tomorrow, or maybe he's back Thursday. I think Nick is back tomorrow, and Muafik is back Thursday. Yeah, Muafik's PTO runs through Wednesday, but I'm not sure how that'll work in terms of his time difference and that sort of thing. So he might be on tomorrow.
Got it. Sounds good. Did we already open a tracking issue for updating the release process with our new stuff? I think I just had a to-do item like on my notes from the release. I don't think we opened an official issue, did we?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, so let's just open an issue for updating the process as a whole and then add the minimal stacks to it.
Cool.
Okay, so I'll take care of that. Okay, and then does anybody have time for building or publishing the minimal stacks today? I think, I could get to that late, maybe tonight, but I don't think I'll be able to for a while still.
I could probably get to it sometime this afternoon/evening.
Okay, let's I'll just put my name on it right now, because I know you got some other things to do today too, Dan. I might find some time while in other
Meetings.
discussions. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that is all the action items there, and yeah, that's the end of the agenda here. So if there are not any further items for discussion, then we can go ahead and adjourn for the week.
Cool. Thanks, Jared.
Alrighty. See ya, everybody.
See ya. Happy Tuesday.